Eh bien, yop tout le monde, c'est SOCIAUX et aujourd'hui on se retrouve sur le jeu The Stanley Parable pour un petit let's play, voilà quoi. Alors qu'est-ce que c'est que ce jeu? Alors pour ceux qui connaissent pas, car c'est vrai que ce jeu date de 2013, donc pour ceux qui connaissent pas, je vais vous expliquer rapidement ce que c'est. En gros c'est une histoire racontée par une voix off et en fait on doit suivre ce que dit la voix off.
This is the story of a man named Stanley. Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427. Employee number 427's job was simple. He sat at his desk in room 427 and he pushed buttons on a keyboard. Orders came to him through a monitor on his desk, telling him what buttons to push, how long to push them, and in what order. This is what employee 427 did every day of every month of every year. And although others might have considered it soul-rending, Stanley relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job. And Stanley was happy. And then one day, something very peculiar happened. Something that would forever change Stanley. Something he would never quite forget. He had been at his desk for nearly an hour when he realized that not one single order had arrived on the monitor for him to follow. No one had showed up to give him instructions, call a meeting, or even say hi. Never in all his years at the company had this happened, this complete isolation. Something was very clearly wrong. Shocked, frozen solid, Stanley found himself unable to move for the longest time. But as he came to his wits and regained his senses, he got up from his desk and stepped out of his office.
Ok, donc là on peut jouer, donc apparemment on va tout le personnel de cette entreprise a disparu à part moi et du coup on va aller voir un petit peu ce qui s'y passe. Donc bien évidemment, bon je connais un peu le jeu donc
All
je
of
sais
his
que...
co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
Je sais que du coup les portes s'ouvrent pas trop, on peut pas aller là où on voulait.
No matter how hard Stanley looked, he couldn't find a trace of his co-workers.
Du coup voilà, par exemple là je suis en train de fouiller un peu les bureaux machin et là il vient de dire que justement il cherchait tout dans tous les recoins. Donc c'est vraiment un jeu un peu, comment dire, tordu, genre peu importe ce que tu fais ça a été calculé par le jeu. Par exemple là si je fouille là, est-ce qu'il y a un petit dialogue qui va s'ouvrir? Je pense que cette porte, ouais, on peut pas l'ouvrir, c'est dommage. Ah je pense que, peut-être qu'on va devoir passer par là, je ne sais pas. Donc voilà, on peut vraiment fouiller un peu tout, les cafés renversés. On peut pas interagir avec le café. Parce que t'es drôle qu'il y ait une voix, ils disent une vue de tasse par terre, machin.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left.
Ok, donc là il nous dit de prendre la porte de gauche, donc on va aller à gauche. On a dit qu'on allait l'obéir pour l'instant. Après on verra combien de temps ça dure si on obéit pas.
Yet there was not a single person here either. Feeling a wave of disbelief, Stanley decided to go up to his boss's office, hoping he might find an answer there.
Donc ça c'est apparemment comment résoudre une dispute avec son compagnon de travail, enfin son voisin de travail.
Stanley stepped into the broom closet, but there was nothing here, so he turned around and got back on track.
Donc là, bon voilà, il dit que je suis arrêté. Ouais, bon, je vais pas vous dire chaque détail de ce que je fais, mais vous comprenez un petit peu le but de ce jeu, quoi.
Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
Par exemple, vous voyez que là, je pense que si on fait pas toute la même vidéo, là on irait, on descendrait quoi pour voir ce qu'il y a un petit peu. Bah, je pense que du coup, le bureau du patron est là.
Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. Shocked, unraveled, Stanley wondered in disbelief who orchestrated this. What dark secret was being held from him? What he could not have known was that the keypad behind the boss's desk guarded the terrible truth that his boss had been keeping from him. And so the boss had assigned it an extra secret PIN number. 2 2845. But of course, Stanley couldn't possibly have known this.
Oh putain, c'est horrible parce que du coup, il nous donne le code, c'est 2854 je crois. Ah putain, je sais pas du coup ce qu'il faudrait faire parce que soit on met le code, mais justement.
Stanley just sat around twiddling his thumbs. Trying to input anything on the device was useless, since he could never possibly know that the combination was 2845.
Non mais vous comprenez un petit peu le concept de ma situation quoi, parce que normalement je suis pas censé savoir un petit peu le code. Et
2845.
Et puis la narration elle est en train de s'énerver là, je suis mort. Bon, on va rentrer la combinaison du coup. 2, 8, 5, 4. Attendez, si on se trompe, ça fait quoi?
Forgot, but it turns out that the panel's emergency... Stanley simply began entering random codes into the keypad, knowing full well the sheer statistical unlikelihood that this would ever result in a correct combination. If he knew that the combo was 2845, it would be another story entirely. But no, this is what he was going to do instead.
Ah ouais, donc là il en a eu marre, du coup il... Ah c'est drôle, non franchement ce jeu est assez drôle. Bon, je pense qu'il faut descendre, il n'y a pas de choix. Du coup je pense qu'il y a moyen de bien se taper des barres dans ce jeu. Je pense qu'il y a moyen de bien d'énerver la voix off, etc. Je pense qu'il y a moyen de faire beaucoup de choses dans ce jeu.
Deeper into the building, Stanley realized he felt a bit peculiar. It was a stirring of emotion in his chest, as though he felt more free to think for himself, to question the nature of his job. Why did he feel this now, when for years it had never occurred to him? This question would not go unanswered for long.
Ouais, du coup là, on arrive un petit peu dans les
Stanley walked straight ahead through the large door that read Mind Control Facility.
Centre de contrôle. Ah ouais, donc soit on s'échappe à gauche. Ah ouais, soit il y a une sortie à gauche, soit on suit la... Non, on va suivre la narration. Franchement, c'est tentant de désobéir, mais pour l'instant, on va suivre un petit peu tout ce qu'elle dit vraiment. Du coup, là, il y a un bouton lumière.
The lights rose on an enormous room packed with television screens.
Ah oui.
What horrible secret did this place hold? Stanley thought to himself. Did he have the strength to find out?
Ah oui, d'accord. Donc là, il y a beaucoup d'écrans. C'est bizarre, hein, quand même. C'est une sacrée construction qu'ils ont fait. Donc là, il y a les caméras. Il n'y a pas d'autres boutons, non, donc on va prendre les caméras du coup.
Now the monitors jumped to life, their true nature revealed. Each bore the number of an employee in the building, Stanley's co-workers. The lives of so many individuals
c'est toutes les caméras des bureaux des gens là.
Wow. One of them, eternally monitored in this place where freedom meant nothing.
En gros, tout ce que tu faisais, c'était surveillé à partir d'ici, quoi. Du coup...
This mind control facility, it was too horrible to believe. It couldn't be true. Had Stanley really been under someone's control all this time? Was this the only reason he was happy with his boring job? That his emotions had been manipulated to accept it blindly?
Okay, du coup,
no, he refused to believe it. He couldn't accept it. His own life in someone else's control? Never! It was unthinkable, wasn't it? Was it even possible? Had he truly spent his entire life utterly blind to the world? But here was the proof, the heart of the operation. Controls labeled with emotions, happy or sad or content, walking, eating, working, all of it monitored and commanded from this very place. And as the cold reality of his past began to sink in, Stanley decided that this machinery would never again exert its terrible power over another human life, for he would dismantle the controls once and for all.
En fait, il y a un truc à faire ici, mais c'est pas dans l'histoire qu'il faut qu'on suive, quoi.
At last he found the source of the room's power. He knew it was his duty, his obligation, to put an end to this horrible place and to everything it stood for.
Donc, En gros, ouais, on va désactiver, on va suivre la voie, j'ai dit.
Blackness and a rising chill of uncertainty. Was it over? Yes. He had won. He had defeated the machine, unshackled himself from someone else's command. Freedom was mere moments away. And yet,
c'est la liberté,
even
ça.
as the immense door slowly opened, Stanley reflected on how many puzzles still lay unsolved. Where had his co-workers gone? How had he been freed from the machine's grasp? What other mysteries did this strange building hold? But as sunlight streamed into the chamber, he realized none of this mattered to him, for it was not knowledge or even power that he had been seeking, but happiness. Perhaps his goal had not been to understand, but to let go. No longer would anyone tell him where to go, what to do, or how to feel. Whatever life he lives, it will be his. And that was all he needed to know. It was perhaps the only thing worth knowing. Stanley stepped through the open door. Stanley felt the cool breeze upon his skin, the feeling of liberation, the immense possibility of the new path before him. This was exactly the way, right now, that things were meant to happen. And Stanley was happy.
Ok, donc là je pense qu'on a terminé le jeu. Oui, on a terminé le jeu, du coup on recommence au début. Donc au final cette vidéo dure un petit peu longtemps quoi, je vais pas faire plus que 15 minutes quoi. Du coup je vais vous dire que c'est déjà la fin de cette première vidéo sur ce jeu. Je pense qu'on va continuer les épisodes où on va devoir se rebeller etc. Il y a aussi un système de succès, mais ça je vous expliquerai dans les prochaines vidéos sur ce jeu. Et du coup en attendant, je vous dis à des prochaines vidéos. Et puis écoutez, portez-vous bien. Puis du coup, bis les gens.
I fucked your bitch, nigga. I fucked your bitch. I fucked your bitch, nigga. I fucked your bitch. She said my